I'm never quite sure how fast real-time analytics is supposed to be. Does it mean instantaneous or is it something else? So can you just tell me, what does real-time analytics mean to you? Zuzanna, do you want to go first?
So real-time analytics can mean different things depending on the industry. So of course, we can talk about the real time when we're talking about a couple of milliseconds. So these are the very critical use cases. Like imagine in Formula One, you don't want your engine to just explode during the race. So you should be able to process all the data and actually get an alert that, okay, something is going wrong, as soon as possible. So here we're talking about milliseconds, but very, very often people who really care about this level of latency, they would go as deep as the hardware to actually optimize for latency. And there are those cases. But then actually many more cases, what we see is, let's say, sub-second latency, or even, it may mean, for some people, it means seconds, but we're moving more towards just analytics being operational. So like how fast can a human make a decision, right? For example, this is something that allows the human operators and systems to be reactive to change, still collect all the data and actually process it in such a way that it's not for reporting, but it's actually for operational decisions being made. So let's think about real-time in logistics, for example, right? We're not at milliseconds, engines blowing up or level. But still, we want to know, as soon as possible, because as the data comes in, like some intervals, we want to know that, let's say, a box of vaccines is about to get spoiled because it was just forgotten somewhere on the site, right? So, generally speaking, I would say ideally, we're like sub-seconds for to say really real time, and milliseconds in the critical cases.
Okay, that's quite a broad range, and then I can certainly see how you don't want to wait several seconds if you're on a Formula One track and then find out your engine's exploded. But certainly I like the idea of it just being faster than an analyst, because very often with data science, you ask someone a question, they come back with an answer a week later, and that's very much not real time. Okay, so I'd love to talk a bit about use cases and who's making use of real-time analytics. You gave a few examples there. Hélène, can you just expand on this? Like, where have you seen real-time analytics being used?
So to give context, I work in the insurance industry, which is traditional in many, many aspects. But what is really, really fascinating for me is that the client base that we as an industry underwrite and insure and risk manage is moving at a faster pace than the insurance industry can deliver changes in insurance products and services to cater for that. That having been said, the client base is also knowing their risk much better than us as an industry. And it's from a use case perspective, we're seeing it across the board where there are fixed assets. So that could, I say fixed, it could be a ship that moves, right? It could be a building, it could be anything that is a tangible asset, and it's being used across the board. And I really liked Zuzanna's example earlier around the vaccines. So one such use case is how do you monitor the temperature and condition of vaccines as they go through from production right through into the arm? So where in the value chain was it failing from a temperature perspective? And two things from that. One is, actually, I need to send some more vaccines down the same pipe, down the same supply chain, so that you can get individuals vaccinated. But actually, is it always failing at one particular point? Do we need to go and change the freezer? I'm being simplistic in my example, but do we need to change the freezer? Do we need to do something else? So there's a whole bunch of examples. And actually, again, just going back to the real-time original question, as insurers, we probably don't need real-time, because if a tap is dripping, it's probably going to drip for a little bit before we perhaps need to think about sending a plumber in for it to not be a flood. But there's so many use cases. And one of the ways that we drive and create use cases in the industry is actually looking at where there's been a claim. So where something bad has happened, could a sensor and therefore real-time data have prevented or mitigated or made it not quite as bad as it ended up being? So there's a whole plethora of use cases, but the ones I'm most familiar with are in ships, in commercial properties, and also supply chain.